everyone, and welcome to today's episode of M&A Empow'her'ment. I'm your host, Kelsey Thomas, and today my guest is Kate Santa Cruz. She is an associate from DBD Investment Bank. Welcome, Kate. If you'd like to take a second to introduce yourself and tell everyone about your role in the M&A process.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kelsey, for having me. Super excited to be on the show today. And like Kelsey said, I'm Kate Santa Cruz. I'm an associate at DBD Investment Bank. DBD is a boutique lower middle market investment bank based out of New York City. We bank founder led, family owned businesses, and we have three main service lines of business. So we'll do M&A, both buy side and sell side. We'll do capital formation and on some cases, we'll do some restructuring. We're generalists. We just tend to stay away from certain industries like real estate, oil and gas, and basically anything that requires a PhD to understand the business model. But other than that, we've pretty much seen and done it all. So that's a little bit about DBD, and looking forward to the rest of the questions in the podcast here.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, sounds super interesting. So what we would love to hear is a little bit of recent professional success.
So one of the most recent professional successes that I would call, and it's definitely a timely question, is back in February I was actually promoted to associate. So it was a pretty big deal for me, as well as my family. It was we were all super happy and excited to reach this milestone, especially because investment banking is exactly what they say it is. It's super hard, it's very challenging. There's a lot of competition. It's very technical. There's so many different components in investment banking that isn't actually taught in school, like business etiquette and how to facilitate and manage relationships across the board with the whole ecosystem in investment banking. So that was a pretty big deal for me. And one of the interesting things about that promotion was now there was an expectation of, as an analyst, you do a lot of the analytical work. You create the go to market documentation, you create the outreach list, who you're going to go out to, all of the kind of behind the scenes work that goes into a deal. And now there was the expectation of, okay, a successful associate, what does that look like? It's bringing in deals and
Mhm.
sourcing is king in this in this business. And I think, adding that small line to the business description was interesting, and it kind of intimidated me a little bit, just because I'm thinking of, like, who am I going to reach out to that would trust me to sell their business or to provide any sort of, advisory services? Like, all of my friends are, we're in our mid 20s. They probably don't have their own businesses. They're not owners or entrepreneurs. Or maybe they are, but they're in the early stages and their business hasn't scaled to a point where it's bankable for us. And but I took that uh change or modification from my role, and I was like, what can I do in order to be successful? And I feel like as long as I'm doing something in order to move that needle, um you never know where it's going to go. So I think the power of this industry and New York City is the power of the network. There's so many different groups. There's, different associations that you can be a part of. There's different clubs. Like, I went to school at Cornell, so I'm part of the Cornell Club, and they'll host different events throughout the year. Um, and you just meet a huge group of diverse people, and there's really power in the network, and you never know what a connection on LinkedIn or an introduction to somebody who maybe is in your role or isn't, but is in an industry that's adjacent to it, what that can lead to. And so, I've took the, and it's also a lot of work, right? Like, it's not just like meeting people, it's building those
Yeah.
relationships and maintaining those relationships and making sure, like, you met somebody in January and have that continuous follow up. Um, and lo and behold, 8 months later, and 2 days ago, I signed my first engagement letter of my first client that I sourced. So it's been a kind of, a full circle moment for sure, but it just made me realize that nothing is honestly impossible. And as long as you're putting in the work, um, something positive um, should come out of that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, first of all, congratulations on the promotion and getting your first client. That's amazing. And you're right. I mean, there's so many things that go into the role in investment banking that you just, it's not, it's hard to prepare for. So, I think that that's a great lead into kind of like this last question, thinking about where you're at in your career. What would you say to other women that are looking to get into this profession, or at least in the M&A world to some degree? What can you tell them about your experiences that might help them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think just in general, a career in finance can be a little bit intimidating just because of the bro culture. It's highly, male dominated. There's not a lot of women in these spaces or sitting at these tables. But if there's anything that I've learned, it's like if I can do it, then you can certainly do it. Like it doesn't matter where you come from, what your background is, or anything. Like if you're meant to be in these spaces, you will end up in these spaces. And I say that because I did 2.5 years at Cornell, but prior to that, I actually transferred. So I did my first 2.5 years at Santa Fe College, got my associates of arts in business administration, and when you do community, there's a lot of value in community college, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
reasons why you should pursue your education in I'm a huge proponent of community college. I feel like if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have been able to get to Cornell, and if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't be where I am in the position that I am today. um and in community college, they don't necessarily, it's kind of like a generalist program. They don't tell you what the career paths look like. I always knew I wanted to be involved in business, but I never knew what type of business. I didn't know what careers there were out there. Right? Like I was like, I guess I'll be some form of financial advisor. I don't know what that looks like. And then I got into Cornell, and over there, it's like a clear roadmap of what success looks like or what the different careers are. People either go into consulting, people go into investment banking, and then just like a bunch of other career paths that I had never known about. And so what I've realized is the power of the network and meeting people and getting involved and not looking at it through the lens of, what can somebody do for me, but more of what can I do for somebody. When I went through my whole community college experience and getting to Cornell, I started kind of like a transfer initiative where I would help other people, other students who were looking to transfer into, it didn't have to be an Ivy League institution, but anything, any sort of path to transferring into a different institution. Because I think, it's really about, I just think anybody can do it. As long as you have to put the right foot forward and do your part, do your research, talk to people and network, and eventually, you'll be in these spaces for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the last thing that I want to say is, like, again, investment banking is like, it is what it is. Like it comes with the territory. What they say in the news or online or on social media, it's 90% of it is true. But I think once you get into those spaces, like, take full advantage of it. You're already there. The hardest part in investment banking is getting in. Once you're in, you can either pivot, you can move, but you've proven to yourself and to other recruiters that you're capable and able to do this type of job or this type of career. And so once you're in,
Right.
take full advantage of it. Take advantage of, your counterparts. I think there's always something that can be learned from the people around you. Um and nobody really knows how you feel inside. Like, it's super interesting because sometimes I'll feel in friendships or relationships, I'll feel one type of way. And then I'll speak with like my friend and they'll be like, oh, I never had any idea. Like, you look like you're the most confident person in the room. And so a lot of it is like reshifting that internal voice and
Hmm.
making it positive. And once you kind of do that, I think you're going to be unstoppable. Yes. The last thing that I want to kind of add to that um, question is, once you do get to these spaces in M&A or in investment banking or private equity or just financial services in general, make sure that you're helping other women and the future generations to get into these spaces. I think we've done a pretty good job of, having more women involved. And, I remember when I was an intern a couple years ago, there was only one female managing director at the investment bank. And it was a huge, it was a pretty big bulge bracket investment bank. And I think more and more there are more females and women's in these spaces, but I think it's so important to, what your journey looked like. Let's help other women. And it doesn't have to be investment banking, right? It could be another type of career path. But, I think it's important to look at the future generation, and we have so much power in shifting that and transforming that.
I think that's great advice. Yeah. I mean, there's always so many narratives that kind of go through our heads and the things we've been told and the things that, they just kind of get to you after a little while. But it's like if you can change the narrative and then use that in a positive way to impact others and to help others along the way, I mean, that's how we're all ultimately going to be successful as women in the space. So I think that's great advice. But yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone. Again, this is Kate Santa Cruz. She's an associate at DBD Investment Bank. It was a pleasure to have you. And again, congratulations on the promotion and the client.